Hello, my name is Ashley Sears, and my presentation is on adverse childhood experiences. I want to give a heads up saying I have strep and flu, so my voice is a little shot, but I'm going to be trying my best to get through this, so I'm sorry in advance if stuff doesn't sound clear. So, this presentation, I'll be going over what ACEs are. I'm going to be defining them and basically defining what is categorized as an ACE. I'll be talking about impacts on development. I will be talking about statistics, so who experiences ACEs, and that will also get into some not cultural differences, but racial and socioeconomic differences between who experiences ACEs. And then I will also be talking about risk and protective factors. So, what are ACEs? ACEs are adverse childhood experiences, and they can be potentially traumatic events that occur during childhood. I think it's important to recognize the word potentially in this sentence, so we'll talk about it a little bit more later, but what might be traumatic for one child doesn't necessarily mean it's traumatic for another child. And we'll talk about a little bit why that happens later on. These experiences can be categorized as abuse, neglect, or household challenges. So abuse is the first category. So there's physical abuse, which is being struck by a parent or another adult. This other adult does not have to be a member of the household. It can be an adult at school, at places of worship, anywhere the child frequents regularly. There's verbal abuse, which is being yelled at or humiliated by a parent or another adult. There's emotional abuse, which is being insulted by a parent or other adult. And I think it's important to recognize that emotional and verbal abuse are often categorized under the same umbrella, but emotional abuse can take place in non-verbal ways, so I think it's important to distinct the two. And then there is obviously sexual abuse, which is being touched sexually or molested by a parent or another adult. The second category is neglect. There's physical neglect, which is not having basic needs met. So that can look like not having enough food, not having clothes that fit, not having stable shelter. So experiencing homelessness is a type of physical neglect, and that is an adverse childhood experience. There's educational neglect. So that is where the child does not receive proper education. That can either be through parents not signing their child up for school, not sending them to school, stuff like that. There's emotional neglect, which is not having an adult who makes the child feel safe or protected. And then there's medical neglect, which is not being given adequate health or dental care. And one of my sources, I think, thought this was interesting. It said children with special health needs are more likely to experience ACEs compared to children who don't have advanced medical needs. Then there are household challenges. So these can look like a lot of different things that don't necessarily fit into neat categories, but here are some of the big ones I found. Violence, so that can be domestic violence or just witnessing violence between parents. That can be physical or sexual violence that the child is witnessing. There's separation, so divorce, obviously parents are separating, or this can look like incarceration, where a parent, a relative, or a other adult has in the household has been jailed. Substances, where a parent or other adult uses substances in the home. A mental illness, so a parent, relative, or other adult has a mental illness, or a parent, relative, other adult who has attempted or died via suicide. So impacts on development, there are short and long-term effects. So short-term effects, basically it's fight or flight. It's the fast heart rate, the high blood pressure, the changes in breathing, the dilated pupils, the memory issues. This last one is especially common in younger children, loss of bladder control. it's kind of a really telltale sign of some type of ACE, where if a child, especially in like a child that shouldn't necessarily be experiencing loss of bladder control, is experiencing it, that's like kind of a really big sign that they're experiencing an ACE. And then long-term effects, immunosystem deficiencies, that comes from chronic stress. Chronic stress has been known to depress the immune system, so that's where that comes from. Unhealthy behaviors, this can look like risky sex, substance use. There are long-term effect of less education or less opportunities for education, employment, and financial security. And then there are mental and physical health conditions, so relating back to that immune system deficiency, and also experiencing things like depression, anxiety, PTSD, phobias can all stem from experiencing ACEs. So who experiences ACEs? So this source is from the US, so I'm assuming all the studies were done in the US. So 3 in 4 high school students in the US reported experiencing 1 or more ACEs, and then 1 in 5 students experienced 4 or more ACEs. So ACEs are relatively common. And then common ACEs experienced are emotional abuse, physical abuse, and living in a household affected by poor mental health or substance use. So one of my sources had this really fantastic graph that I had to mention, and there'll be another one later, but this one is specifically ACEs by race. So what I found interesting was that Black non-Hispanic individuals were significantly more likely to experience either an ACE or multiple ACEs. But what I didn't expect was how Asian non-Hispanics are significantly less likely to experience ACEs. I mean, this is a huge gap that I just was not expecting for that population to be. They're doing something right, I guess, because they do not experience as many ACEs as other populations. I thought that was very interesting. And then this is ACEs by income. This is what I was expecting. So this is either at or below the poverty line, and then this is more above the poverty line as you go. And obviously, the lower your income is, the more likely you are going to experience an ACE. Obviously, especially with like the physical neglect one, it's hard to provide basic needs if you can't afford them. So I was not surprised by this graph at all, but it's important to mention. So risk factors and protective factors. Risk factors are activities, traits that may indicate that a child has experienced or is experiencing an ACE. And then protective factors are activities or traits that may indicate that a child is less likely to be impacted by an ACE. So this is what I was talking about a little bit earlier with like what might be traumatic for one child isn't necessarily traumatic for another child. Some children just might have more protective factors in place to help them cope with whatever the experience may be. So these are some examples of some risk factors and protective factors. I think it's important to note that these protective factors can be implemented by parents, teachers, and then also some of these in like societal and community lawmakers. These are things that we can advocate for helping our children. And then these are my references. So yes, thank you.